Welcome, kindreds, it's Jessica. We're deep into January, the new year has come and gone, and I'm only now beginning to plan and organise my year. Perhaps you're the same. The energy this year has been a slow burn, the fire is just beginning to catch, and I'm fine with that. I appreciate the fresh energy of a new year, but it's not like you're going to magically wake up on January the 1st as a completely different person, with perfect habits, goals and plans firmly in place. We start from where we are, and wherever that is, it's okay. In this video, I'm going to share my system for getting organised and set up to have a fruitful year. And if it works for me, a weird and witchy creative misfit, then I think there's a good chance it will work for you. Just really quickly before we get into the details, I don't believe that the perfect one-size-fits-all organisation system actually exists. And honestly, I feel like searching for it can be a way of procrastinating and keeping from doing the actual work of getting organised and feeling ready and excited for a new year. How do I know this? Because I do this too. It's a common thread for so many of us, especially for neurodiverse folks, and it can be a huge source of anxiety. But there are steps that you can take which will move you closer to where you want to be and which release a lot of the worry and feelings of being overwhelmed and underprepared. Let's start. The first step is implementing a calendar system which works for you. Missing appointments is stressful. Feeling like you're supposed to be doing something but you're not sure what is stressful. Worrying that you've forgotten something important is stressful. Once you have a working system for appointments and events, then that stress just goes away. Yes, this is really basic, so you may already have something in place for this, which is great. You can skip to the next step. Timestamps are down below. If you're still here, let's talk about calendar and planner options. Many people do well with pre-printed paper planners to keep their appointments organised. Other people prefer to go digital and keep it all in their phone. I used a notebook as a bullet journal for years to keep track of appointments, but have recently switched over to a digital calendar because my children are older now and we can all sync our events and appointments and keep track of what's going on for the whole family. There are thousands of options out there, so it's easy to get bogged down and overwhelmed. Just pick a system and stay with it for at least 2 months to see if it works for you. Even if you don't end up sticking with the same format you choose first, you will have a much better idea of the features you like and want in a calendar than if you keep chopping and changing too soon. Ultimately, the method you use for keeping track of appointments and events doesn't matter. What matters is whether it works for you and that you actually use it. A large part of getting organised is training ourselves to use the tools. I'll come back on to how to do that in step 5. Step 2 is getting task management sorted. This is huge. Some people use their calendar to schedule tasks, and if that works for you, then great. I originally added all kinds of things onto my calendar, trying to get it to function as a task management system. I even added things like bedtime, prep dinner, walk the dog, check email, but this just made my calendar look crazy. And it was easy for actual events and appointments to get lost. And making meals, walking the dog and bedtime are things which I was obviously going to do anyway, whether they were on the list or not. But I don't regret trying this out because it helped me realise that there are some things I need to do which don't have to be assigned a specific time or day. They just need to be noted somewhere where I'll see them and do them in the right time frame. Realising that separation between appointments or events and tasks was a huge game changer for me. If it's something I need to do at a specific time and day, then it's an event or appointment and goes on my calendar. If it's something I need to do just sometime on a day or that week or month, then it's a task and doesn't get added to the calendar but put on a to-do list instead. This might all seem very obvious to you, but I'm 44 years old and have only recently got a handle on this, so don't feel bad if you're the same. We're always learning and growing. I like to split my tasks into 2 categories, recurring tasks and one-off tasks. Recurring tasks, unsurprisingly, are those which need to be done over and over. Things like putting out the bins on a Monday evening or updating my online grocery shop on a Thursday. If you're the kind of person who remembers these regular things without writing them down, then you may not need this category at all. One-off tasks are those which are one and done and can be ticked off. Depending on your situation, you might want to separate this category further, like having personal and work tasks in separate lists. You can use digital or paper solutions for task management or use a combination approach. If you're someone who always carries your phone, then perhaps a digital task list would work best. There are loads of apps which offer a to-do list function. Or you can just use your phone notes or reminders. Or if you don't like having a digital device with you, then you can go with a pocket notebook. This is so simple and works really well. Of course, you can make your system more complex if that's helpful. For example, I have a Kanban board in Notion which holds my personal tasks. I have it set up so that each week I can just click and generate the following week's recurring tasks, and I can then add in anything extra that I need to do that week. I add all the extras onto Monday, but I can easily drag them onto the next day if they don't get done. I've learned that I'm better not including work tasks on this list, as that just clogs my system, and I only have 3 days a week where I work, so I have a separate to-do list for that. I also have a morning and evening routine checklist, but this is kind of extra. I'm testing it out, so I'll let you know in a future video if I actually find it helpful ongoing. My task management system is working well for me at the moment, but something like a wipe-off list on the fridge door could fulfill the same function. The tools you use really don't matter, apart from that you should find them easy and useful. And if aesthetics are important to you, then you will also want to consider that when choosing your system. But like with the calendars, don't get stuck in the choosing. Just try things out for a decent amount of time. You can always refine or change things up later when you know more about what you need. Okay, the next step is journaling. I've kept a journal for over 30 years and it still surprises me how useful it is. It's the cornerstone of everything I do, and it's a large part of what I share here on my channel. There are lots of different types of journals you can keep, and I've noticed people tend to focus on the type of journal they want to keep in terms of what form it takes, rather than what they use it for. For example, people want to know how to start like a bullet journal or an art journal or a junk journal, but there seems to be less awareness of what role they want this journal to fulfill in their lives. The way I see it is that journals have 5 main functions. You can use a journal for managing appointments, tasks and events. Most people use calendars or planners for this stuff, but bullet journaling is a good example of this kind of use case. You can journal to work out how you actually think or feel about something, or to get some clarity and space in your mind, letting the words flow freely. This is my absolute favourite journal function and is the reason why journaling gets shown time and again to be so helpful for mental health. This kind of journaling can look like a messy scrawl in a cheap lined pad or gorgeous art journal spreads, but the function is still the same. You can use a journal to plan personal growth, like goal setting and monitoring. Some people use their planners for this. Other people have beautiful manifestation journals with vision boards and scripting. I use my journal to plan personal growth in alignment with the astrology and lunar cycles, and weave in tarot spreads and omens to guide my decision making and priorities. All of these kinds of journals look very different, but fulfill the same function of moving us closer to our goals. You can also journal for insights, ideas and inspiration that you want to refer back to in the future. This crosses into knowledge management or second brain territory. If you're not a planner and organisation nerd like me, then you may not have come across those terms, which is valid and honestly probably healthy. If you do know what those things are, then I think it's good to keep in mind that having an immaculate system for organising notes is not critical to getting organised. Helpful, but definitely not essential. Making a note in your journal of things you want to come back to is enough, especially when you're getting your system set up and solid. The 5th function you can use a journal for is memory keeping. This can look like recording the events of your day in bullet notes or making an elaborate scrapbook about your trip to Paris. A gratitude journal also falls into this memory keeping category, I feel, though you could argue it's more aligned with personal growth or even the figuring out what you think form of journaling. It really depends on your reasons for doing it. I'm going to make a separate video going more deeply into these different functions of journaling soon, because I think it's so useful having these different purposes in mind, and it's not something that I see being talked about. If you already have a planner or calendar and a way to organise your tasks, then you won't need a journal for that stuff. But having somewhere for the 4 other use cases is so helpful. Having a journal practice alongside your goals and tasks brings so much more depth and meaning. Anxious over appointments? Write that in your journal. You can record your day, add things like gratitude if you want, make a note of books you might want to read. You can get fancy with washi and pens and stickers if you like. But the basics is a space to reflect on the day and get clear. It sounds so simple, but when you've written making appointments causes anxiety over 30 times, it gets harder to ignore and push that into the shadow. You can go analog, digital, expensive or cheap for your journal. Just try not to fall into the trap of seeking the perfect notebook or system. Yes, I still do this and I have to keep stopping myself. Although you can have fun experimenting. I do a lot of that and share it here on my channel. When you're journaling, think about which function your journal is fulfilling for you in that moment. I think that's really helpful. Okay, step 4 is about choosing our own goals and priorities, identifying the things which are actually important to us and how we want to connect with them. Having this information then trickles down and influences the kinds of things we keep notes on in our journals and the kinds of tasks which make it onto our to-do lists. It's a bottom-up and top-down system. So how do you set the right goals? Well, you've probably heard that advice to visualize your future you. What does your life look like? What work are you doing? Who do you interact with? How are you working? What do you look like? What are you wearing? I found these kinds of exercises can feel kind of disempowering because the end goal is so far away from where you are now that it's just disheartening. It's like trying to appreciate the view at the end of a long journey before you've even left home. It can feel more like looking at a postcard than the real thing. To be clear, I think these exercises do have value, but this more for figuring out your overall trajectory, where you want to be in perhaps 5, 10 or even 20 years, and identifying the things which are important to you, which is great, but that can be a bit overwhelming when you want a shorter and more manageable time frame for your goals. It's like that Matthew Kelly quote, which says, most people overestimate what they can do in a day and underestimate what they can do in a month. We overestimate what we can do in a year and underestimate what we can accomplish in a decade. Our vision may be far on the horizon and kind of divorced from where we are right now. And when something feels unattainable, it can mean we stop trying. So do the dreaming and visualizing, but when it comes to picking what to start on first, I think it's good to address the biggest pain points which you're facing right now. What would you like to implement this year which will make your life better right now? If you're not sure where to start with this, I made a video where I looked at the different areas of my life as a starting point and rated how healthy I felt in those areas. That can be a really good place to work from when setting goals if you feel overwhelmed by it. I'll link that video down below. It's a mid-year reset video, but the process is valid at any time when you're considering goals. It can be useful to identify a pretty broad goal at first, something like, I will be healthy this year, or I will be happy at work this year, or I will enjoy my home this year. I know this goes against the advice to make your goals actionable and measurable, but you can do that work once you have the overall bigger thing that you want to achieve identified. The next step is to identify what your goal statement actually means to you. This one gets left out, I feel, a lot. So 2 people might have the same overarching goal of enjoying their home this year, but the details of it will be different. So to work out what it means for you, write your goal at the top of a piece of paper or on your computer, whichever works for you, to help you work through your thoughts, and then try to explain what this actually means. So using the example of enjoying your home, you might write things like, I will feel glad to come home because my entrance looks welcoming, or my kitchen is fun to cook in because there's no clutter, or I will sort that damp patch on the living room wall. Try to include feelings and keep going until you can't think of anything else to write. You'll probably notice the major pain points will come up as you do this, so be gentle with yourself. Letting this stuff bubble up and be visible is what we want. Once we can see it, then we can address it. Some of the things you identify might be projects which are too big to take on in a year for timescale reasons or budget reasons. It might even be that through doing this exercise, your goal shifts, and that's great. We're figuring ourselves out. In the case of the example we're talking about here, perhaps one of the pain points is difficult neighbours or something that needs fixing which is too costly to do, in which case your goal might shift to finding a new cosy home this year. Try and keep a playful and gentle curiosity while you do this. It can be really astounding what comes out. So once you've kind of identified your goal, you can work on breaking it down into meaningful chunks and turning these into actionable steps. So cooking isn't currently fun because the cupboards and surfaces are cluttered and frustrating. How can you address that? Could you have a clear out, maybe reorganize the cupboards, make a list of the things you need to do. Then you can assign those tasks to your task list or calendar, depending on what kind of things they are. Sometimes the things you identify aren't really tasks, but habits, like doing the washing up in the evening and putting it away in the morning. So when you come to cook in your kitchen, you don't have to clean it first. This is where things like habit trackers can be really helpful to help us to nudge our behavior in a direction which aligns with our goals. I could talk about the practicalities of goal setting all day. I have other videos about this, and I will definitely make more videos about goals in future, but I don't want this video to be too long, so I'm hoping that's detailed enough to get your planning started. If you have questions or thoughts, let me know in the comments. So much of the productivity advice I see is borderline toxic and doesn't take into account that we're all different and that there's no perfect system which works for everyone. So give yourself plenty of grace. Don't overstretch. Plan for the real, beautiful human you, you, not for the fantasy you who is superhuman. Don't expect to knock it out of the park every day. That's just too much pressure. You also don't need to know the entire year in advance. You're a human, not a capitalist business. This can be in terms of the number of goals you set and also in the timescale you work with. Sometimes breaking things down into smaller chunks of time is helpful and stops piling on pressure. If you're new to setting goals and actually meeting them, then tackling just one goal before setting any others is powerful. Seeing that you can set a goal and achieve it is so motivating and can be much more powerful than setting a bunch of goals and not really meeting any of them. If you struggle with this kind of stuff, then setting a goal of checking your calendar in advance every day for a week could be a really good starting place. Streamline, whittle things down as much as you can. It's better to keep things simple and easy than complex and impossible. I like to have a guiding word for the year which helps to anchor me and keep me on track, and you might find this idea useful too. I've got a playlist for that which I'll link in the description. If you feel overburdened by all the stuff and the things you want to do, then you might find the idea of a depth year to be useful too. That's when you take a year to focus on your existing interests and projects and don't bring in anything new. Again, I have a playlist for this which I'll link. Something which I rarely see mentioned but which is so important with goal setting is identifying the support you need to achieve your goal. Sometimes our goals are things which we can do entirely by ourselves, but most of the time there are at least some parts of our goal which would be easier if we have help. This could be practical, like having someone to look after your children while you go to the gym or art class, or getting someone in to fix your leaky roof. It could be emotional support, like counselling or life coaching. I personally draw a lot on spiritual support through connection with deity, divination and astrology, but having human support is so valuable too. If you identify these support needs when you set your goals, it can make it easier to reach out. Write in your journal about the help you need and then set about looking for it. And just finding it isn't enough, you have to follow through, which leads us on to step 5. It's all very well making plans and setting goals, but if you forget about them and really look at them, then they're not worth the 160 GSM paper they're written on. Our goals need to be part of our lives, and that's why they are part of this 5-step system which begins with a calendar or planner. Step 5 is all about following through. You need to check in with your organisation system regularly, ideally daily. I aim for twice a day, morning and evening. Otherwise, even the most robust system will fail. The tools only help if we use them. That said, try not to put pressure on yourself to have everything in place from the get-go. Putting some things in will make a big difference. It's not like we can take a week or 2 out of our lives to work on this stuff. I find some of the productivity advice out there can be so far away from where we are with our actual lives that it can cause anxiety and overwhelm rather than being helpful. I recommend getting really solid with your calendar, tasks and journaling. Once you have a handle on this, and it frees up space and energy for looking at things like goals. You can habit stack checking your calendar and task list, which means pairing it with something you already do every morning, like brushing your teeth. Or perhaps the morning isn't feasible for you and you prefer making a ritual of it in the evening. Maybe lighting a candle and doing some journaling alongside checking your calendar and to-do list. You get to choose how this stuff fits into your life. It's about supporting yourself and caring for yourself. It's not yet another thing on the to-do list. So if it feels like that, then work out why and make some changes so that it feels nurturing. When you're at the stage of setting a goal and you've broken it into tasks, you can add this to your task management system and calendar. Again, don't overstretch. Tackling one chunk of your goal per week might be manageable. A month might be a better time frame for you. One thing that often gets left out of personal organisation systems is the need for check-ins or reviews. I know it can feel kind of worky and gross to do these at first, but you can turn that on its head and make it a lovely, affirming and gentle opportunity to just see how you've been getting on. It's not about beating yourself up, but about seeing what you've achieved and celebrating that. Seeing what you planned but didn't manage to get to and working out the reasons for that. Pretty much all the time it's because we planned too much and didn't have the necessary support or means to carry that out. We can take that on board and plan more kindly for ourselves next time. Schedule your reviews on your calendar so you remember to do them. I like to do mine at the waning moon. My hope is that you can use these steps to put things in place gradually, building a strong system which works for you and your life and helps to reduce stress and worry and increase the ability to focus on the things which are most important for you personally. I'd love to hear your thoughts about what I've shared here, and if you use the system, please do let me know how it works for you. I hope you have a great year. Warmest blessings, and I'll see you very soon.